One. Welcome to San Francisco's Community News. We're here today with Julian Davis, spokesperson for Kevin Epps. I'm Archbishop Gregory Richardson, and there is a trial going on here in the city and county of San Francisco. And here's a little article that came out from the New Mission. There's Kevin Epps uh, with the New Baby newspaper. And we're going to give you some in-depth details about this. And Julian, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Greg. Appreciate you having me on. I know Kevin is also very grateful for the opportunity for me to come here and speak on his behalf.
So wonderful. So people may not know what's going on. Can we give them a little in-depth?
Sure.
Sure.
Many people have heard of or may have heard of, and if they haven't, we're happy to inform them about Kevin Epps, legendary filmmaker, San Francisco filmmaker, known for Straight Outta Hunters Point, Rap Dreams, Black Rock, a documentary filmmaker from the Bayview Hunters Point, who 9 years ago now was defending himself from an intruder in his home, and is currently now on trial 9 years later for murder in a case that was for a long time by police investigators and by the DA considered to have just been a straightforward matter of self-defense. Why it's currently being prosecuted now 9 years later is a matter of some speculation, but that's what we're here to talk about today. There is a lot more information available on the website justiceforkevinepps.org or j4ke.org for people who want to get more informed about what's happening. But I want to just start by saying, what a remarkable person Kevin Epps is.
Really?
Having grown up in Bayview Hunters Point, he's a guy who is a shining example and a community stalwart, really, of community leadership, a guy who consciously and deliberately chose to avoid a life of deviance and crime and instead to document the issues of systemic poverty and racism, police brutality, gentrification in San Francisco's Black Bayview neighborhood. And for that, has been awarded for numerous awards for his filmmaking, for his journalism, for his mentorship of up-and-coming artists and filmmakers and writers. Ultimately, he experienced a very tragic situation, one that nobody should ever have to, could ever, just pray not to have to experience in their lifetimes. There's been an outpouring of community support in favor of Kevin, and just to endorse and let the community know what so many already know, what a precious person he is and how tragic it is that the state should want to incarcerate a man like this.
And this is not the first time, and this is the third time, I believe, is it? It as well as they charged him before. Nothing happened under Bodine and under previous Gascon,
Mm-hmm.
and now we have another district attorney, Brooke Jenkins, that this case comes out of the blue sky.
So in terms of the sort of timeline that you're referring to, sort of three touch points, I think what might be a good way to think about it. So the incidents that are being prosecuted occurred in 2016. At that time, there were some key witnesses that were on the property when the events occurred, who spoke with police investigators at the time, helped lay the foundation with their statements then for an initial determination of a kind of straightforward self-defense case. This is a man defending himself from a violent intruder inside his home, and using, unfortunately, lethal force to defend himself. Charges were not pressed at the time; they were withheld for insufficient evidence of a crime.
Right. Right.
And that was he was released at the time after being held, I think, for less than a day, one day. Many of us heard about that at the time and, got on with our lives. Sounded like, Kevin was a free man and was not being charged or prosecuted with anything. 3 years later, in 2019, charges were finally brought. It's clear that there wasn't any new evidence at the time, but this was the waning days of the DA Gascon's holding the office of district attorney in San Francisco. There was we might say, zealous ADA named Michael Swart at the time, I think, who, to better understand that context, it's one of sort of selective prosecution, you might say, one in which there is maximum leniency, for instance, for police misconduct, but maximal pressure on Black civilians. And I think, in particular, there was a inability to accept that a Black man who grew up in Bayview Hunters Point, acted in self-defense instead of malice, and an attempt to essentially fabricate new evidence in the case to try and bring it to trial. And so this is a time when this prosecutor in particular contracted with a controversial company called 3D Forensics, which produced, let's say, some fictional 3D animations, which purported to show different scenarios that could have occurred during the shooting. These 3D animations have been excluded from evidence at trial because they are unreal, not reliable. However, they were used in order to bring charges in the case back in 2019.
That's a bias, isn't it?
What it is it's a very prejudicial and, you might say, biased use of technology in order to charge a case that should not have been charged.
Right.
Another example of the use of these 3D animations, for instance, some people might remember and be familiar with the case of Laquan McDonald, a teenager who was shot dead by Chicago police officers in 2016. In that case, the defense of the police officers actually employed the same 3D forensics company to produce some animations. Those animations, for instance, showed Laquan McDonald larger than he was in real life, rushing implausibly quickly towards the officers that shot him, only being shot 5 times instead of 16 times. It showed the officers without bulletproof vests that they were wearing. In short, as prosecutors in Chicago alleged to the jury during that trial, these animations are not real. They are just not real. And similarly, a similar set of fictional animations were produced in order to show various scenarios that actually, in the end, do not match the medical examiner's report, which has evidence of a close range, confrontation between the men and a close range firing. Some of the animations show a greater distance between Epps and Polk, and Polk's body in various positions, including with his back turned, stuff that's just not supported by the forensic evidence at all, and for that reason was excluded at trial. But once again, these animations were used in order to bring charges in 2019. The third touch point, so we've done 2016, 2019, is fast forward to 2025 when the case is now being prosecuted. Again, there's no new evidence in this case since 2016, other than, you might say, just inconsistent testimony from the prosecution's key witness, who's now changed her story completely from 9 years ago, from 6 years ago, from a couple conversations she had with prosecutors early this year to what she says on the witness stand. There are a number of inconsistencies. I'm not going to go into all of them, but I'm going to focus on one in particular, which has to do with the prosecution's key witness, Star Gull, basically portraying Marcus Polk, Kevin's attacker, as somebody who was calm and peaceful and sort of minding his own business. Now, this directly contradicts what she said to police investigators the day after the shooting. And What's more, the prosecutor has then been using this contradictory and inconsistent testimony from the key witness to really tell a narrative and try to get the jury to believe, essentially, that Marcus Polk was a calm and peaceable man, and that Kevin Epps could have de-escalated with him, had a pizza and just talked things through, when the prosecutor knows this not to be the case, and in fact knows independently some facts that were not all of them produced as evidence in the trial, but facts about Marcus Polk's violent criminal history, a man who had a history of violence, of domestic violence, of a conviction for lewd acts against a child, who was a continual parole violator with multiple felonies, was wearing an ankle monitor, had just been released from prison, from jail a few days before, was a daily methamphetamine user who had methamphetamine in his system the day that he attacked Kevin. So for the prosecutor to ask the jury to infer, based upon false testimony essentially, that Marcus Polk was a calm and peaceable man, when he himself, the prosecutor, has access to facts and knowledge of facts that directly contradict what he's asking the jury to believe, is a classic textbook case of prosecutorial misconduct.
Right.
And
right.
in his closing arguments on Monday, halfway through his closing arguments, in fact, defense counsel for Kevin Epps motioned for mistrial on this ground, on the grounds of prosecutorial misconduct, and at least asked Judge Farrell to, if not grant the motion for mistrial, to provide a correction to the jury, both of which he denied, which is judicial error in this case. Not the first time we've seen judicial error in this case. But the bombshell, which is particularly, I think, concerning for San Francisco public and for everyone to know, is that the case that the defense cited, which establishes the Ninth Circuit basically precedent for prosecutorial misconduct, it's a case called United States versus Bluford. In that case, the prosecutor was also found to be asking the jury to infer things that the prosecutor knew to be untrue. The prosecutor in that case, who set the standard for this kind of prosecutorial misconduct, was the very same Jonathan Schmidt, who then was an AUSA in the Attorney General's office, and today is a San Francisco Assistant District Attorney. So he's a repeat offender on this kind of prosecutorial misconduct, and he's engaged in the same kind of misconduct in this prosecution of Kevin Epps.
That is remarkable that this particular legality under the Constitution is violated. So now the jury are making decisions. What actually decisions are they making at this time? The judge instructed them.
Correct.
On several charges.
Correct.
On Kevin Epps. And what actually were they?
Yeah. So the key charge here, which we can just discuss, I think, is the most important one, is murder in the first degree. Now, when we all have a right to self-defense, right? When we defend ourselves, and in this case, when Kevin defended himself and used lethal force to defend himself against a violent intruder in his home, the use of deadly force is justifiable, and it's known as a justifiable homicide.
That's right.
That's what we have in this case. I think we have a zealous district attorney here who is attempting to prosecute him for murder in the first degree, which requires elements like premeditation, deliberation, et cetera, which are not evidenced in the case. So the jury is currently deliberating on is that charge. They've received a number of instructions, important instructions about self-defense, important instructions about the Castle Doctrine in California, which basically provides a presumption that when a person defends themselves from a violent intruder inside their own home, that they acted with a reasonable fear of death or serious bodily injury to themselves. Those are good instructions for the jury to receive. and they will help to counteract the skewed narrative that the prosecutor has attempted to establish for them. And you can understand why the prosecutor is making such a strained and unethical attempt to portray Marcus Polk as calm and peaceable when he knows that he was a violent criminal,
Yes.
precisely because he has the burden of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that this was murder instead of self-defense. And I'll just point out that I think one thing that's particularly egregious about the prosecutorial misconduct in this case is that you keep in mind a district attorney or a public prosecutor, their goal is not just like any old private lawyer to just win a case. Because they work for the people, because they are a part of the government,
Right.
their goal, in fact, is fairness and justice at the end of the day, not just winning. And when prosecutors don't understand their ethical duties and obligations to the people whom they serve, to seek justice and fairness in everything they do, and instead only seek zealously to win, you have an added layer, essentially, of unethical and conduct, which just textbook misconduct that violates a defendant's right to a fair trial under the U.S. Constitution.
And out of all the states in America, California's laws are different from the rest of the states. To where if someone is in your house, for instance, and you're acting to protect yourself or your family, most of those cases are not even heard.
So states have different laws.
Right.
What's known as the Castle Doctrine actually has a long history that goes back at least until the beginning of the 17th century in England.
Yes.
It's a common law doctrine. A man's home is his castle. You may have heard this before.
Right.
Various states have adopted it in various forms, either through statutes or through case law. California, it's through case law, and we have jury instructions that relate to that doctrine. We're also a state where there's no duty to retreat. Sometimes that's called stand your ground in other states. The real question here is whether these doctrines of self-defense, stand your ground, castle doctrine, are being applied fairly and to everyone, right? Because
Right.
what we also know, there's been actually some very interesting recent research and recent press and Slate online publication from Caroline Light, who is a researcher at Harvard and a writer, an author who has written on the topic of the Castle Doctrine. And her recent article is, I think the subtitle, Castle Doctrine is a Racist Lie, right? Because when there's a white defendant, these types of presumptions are applied much more frequently and with less controversy than when it's a black person or a woman or a person from a subjugated community who's defending themselves. So in this case, again, we see the implications of racial prejudice and bias with respect to the selective prosecution of someone like Kevin Epps, when you already see legal presumptions and protections that should be applied equally, like the Castle Doctrine, like stand your ground, etc., which certainly would probably be applied without second thought when you're not dealing with a black man who grew up in Bayview Hunters Point. So the case really does have deep implications for for equal treatment under the law and for applying these protections equally. And if they're not applied equally, they are meaningless. And I mean that the system lacks political legitimacy when it doesn't apply the law equally to everyone, and everyone has this right to self-defense. The fact that we have gotten here 9 years later with a kind of Kafka-esque, lengthy, and strange prosecution of Kevin Epps is certainly a prime example of that in contemporary American society.
And so, for people that are native San Franciscans, and the black community especially are in outrage with this particular type of conduct coming here in San Francisco. So if people, I just want to say, want to get more involved with the case or want to get more information or help support Kevin, I think there's some fund that they have available for him or the paper to do support. Is there a website or?
There is, yeah. I would like to direct everyone to justiceforkevinepps.org. And that's justice, the number 4, kevinepps.org. There's a lot of information in there about Kevin's history in the community and updates about the ongoing trial. And there's links on there as well to a move on petition, which close to 600 people have signed in short order. With respect to requesting that District Attorney Brooke Jenkins dismiss the charges. And there's also a GoFundMe. Kevin has had to spend a lot of time focused directly on this trial and on really he's in a fight for his own life right now. So that's been obviously a huge distraction from being able to work and earn money to support his family. So there's a GoFundMe there to help support him financially as well.
Also for the paper.
And also for the Bayview newspaper, where Kevin has been the executive editor for the past few years. And the Bayview newspaper can always use community support these days. Local media is, under strain and underfunded. So please, your support for the Bayview newspaper, your support for Kevin Epps, justiceforkevinepps.org, all much appreciated.
And there was some very important individuals, everybody is. Danny Glover
right
actually came out and took the time out to show his support.
He did. There was a rally on the steps of the 850 Bryan Street courthouse just last week. We saw Danny Glover come down, attend the rally, and actually attend the court session in which the critical jury instructions were being decided by the judge. We've seen at that same rally leaders from the San Francisco and San Mateo chapters of the NAACP, Reverend Amos Brown, Jonathan Butler, president of the San Francisco chapter of the NAACP, along with a growing list of supporters from Rudy Corpus of United Players, and retired police captain Yolanda Williams, to just dozens and dozens of community supporters, elected officials who had previously spoken up in 2019 that were critical to having Kevin released on bail back then. He's been a free man since then, and is a free man sitting in the courtroom today with supporters surrounding him in the gallery behind him. All of these things, I think, are huge indicators of the unusual nature of this prosecution. All these people showed up and continue to show up at rallies and in the courtroom over the last few weeks. Have been showing up over the last few weeks to show their support. There's been a huge outpouring of support, and we just hope the jury is paying attention and understands the gravity, really, of the decision that they have before them, and the potential tragedy, really, of the state incarcerating a man who has been such a stalwart of community leadership in San Francisco for so many years.
And to me, this is a system of artificial intelligence, which is quite unusual, to actually biasly, in my opinion, make animation according to how it wants to make it. This is going to go down in history, this particular case, because if this tactic, I call it, it's a bias in my opinion, happens, we may see more of these biases throughout America in the near future.
I think it's a real warning that we should be paying very close attention to. This kind of technology predates AI, but with AI, you can imagine it's like, adding gas to the flames of this kind of the use of this kind of technology. So the practice of creating these types of 3D animations is something that again, as I said, predates artificial intelligence, but you look at the last few years with what artificial intelligence has been doing, and you can already just, it doesn't take a wild stretch of the imagination to imagine where this kind of stuff can go. So I think we really need to have a, strong watchdog kind of approach from the public, and strong reactions, and the ability to hold our, public prosecutors and others accountable in terms of the use of this new technology now, with respect to particularly this kind of selective prosecution, and this kind of prosecution where the ability and the possibility of these technologies being used in a racially biased or in the context of a kind of selective prosecution is even greater than it ever was before.
So we're back to fighting for rights that were already established, and that seems civil rights are being diminished in America right now. So is there anything for you go that you want to tell the public? I know they can maybe remind them where they can send support, whether they can write letters to the supervisors or to the elected officials, the mayor and so forth about this particular situation. Would that be helpful, you think?
Absolutely. I'll repeat again the website, justiceforkevinepps.org. Certainly sign the Move On petition. We also have a community statement on there. I mean, many of your viewers and listeners may already know Kevin and know of his work. So sending in a statement or signing on to a statement in support is appreciated and helpful at this time. And just speaking about this with your community, with your family, with your friends, making people aware, speaking up about the injustice, certainly contacting anyone you know in the public,
It's very helpful.
but it's very helpful at this time. So yes, appreciate that.
All right, well, let me thank you so much for taking, I know you're a busy man with family, friends, and then representing Kevin. We thank you for coming in, and we thank Kevin for allowing you to come in to talk with us, and all the best. And we do believe that, as they say, we will survive. We believe in justice, and justice will fall down like a mighty river and flow once again. And thank you so much for coming.
All right, thank you for having me, Greg.
All right, no
thank you.
problem.
All right, take
All
care.
right, thank you.
All right.
Yeah.